Robert Mugabe's reconciliation experiment between 1980 and 1982. After independence, then Prime Minister Robert Mugabe retained officials of the former Rhodesian government. These included Ken Flower, head of the Central Intelligence Organization (CIO), who had previously attempted to assassinate him during the struggle for independence. The CIO were responsible for establishing and supplying Renamo, the Mozambican national resistance, to counter Mozambique's efforts and support for ZANU-PF and the Zanla forces. Mugabe also appointed Emerson Mnangagwa as for State Security at that time. In the first opening of Parliament, Robert Mugabe and Ian Smith were able to walk in side by side. Smith was still the head of 20 parliamentarians who were exclusively selected by white citizens. Prime Minister Mugabe also appointed former Rhodesian minister and head of the Commercial Farmers Union, Dennis Norman, as Minister of Agriculture. This put many farmers at ease because the almost 6,000 white farmers occupied about two-thirds of the most productive land for agriculture. Mugabe promised to observe the Lancaster House Agreement that guaranteed the government could not expropriate any land for 10 years. In the first 2 years after independence, the Zimbabwean economy experienced a 24% growth, most of which benefited whites who not only owned the land but also controlled banking, manufacturing, and most of the high-skilled jobs. Even with Mugabe's message of reconciliation, about 10% of the white population left for South Africa, where they could still live in white superiority. Mugabe also extended an olive branch to South Africa's apartheid government and promised not to allow any African nationalist movements like the ANC or African National Congress to set up military or training camps in Zimbabwe. Mugabe even tried to appease Britain by making it clear that his fight was never with the British people in particular. However, to the African people, Mugabe urged caution and patience. For blacks, he turned out not to be the revolutionary he had promised. Beyond the symbolic gestures of name changes and removal of Rhodes statues, many things remained the same in Zimbabwe. He seemed more keen to please the white community and Britain than the very people that he had fought for. The South African government became even more determined to sabotage Mugabe and Zimbabwe's efforts. They recruited former Rhodesian military personnel and set up a network of spies within Zimbabwe. They were determined to ensure that Zimbabwe would fail and would not be in a position to threaten the apartheid government. They sponsored a series of attacks in Zimbabwe, including the assassination of ANC's representative in Zimbabwe, Joe Kabi, who blew up in Como military barracks, and Renamo attacked the railway, roads, and pipeline that linked Zimbabwe with the port of Beira. The most serious attack was the bombing of ZANU-PF's headquarters in Harare. 7 people died and about 124 were injured in the bomb blast that occurred during the time that Mugabe and his top leaders had been scheduled to meet. In July 1982, the South Africans destroyed 13 aircraft at Zimbabwe's main Air Force base in Thornhill in Gweru. These suspects were interrogated and tortured, but ultimately acquitted by a judge. 3 years after independence, about half the white population had migrated mostly to South Africa. Despite Mugabe's anger towards the white population in Zimbabwe, he chose to massacre the Ndebele and the Kalanga people in what became known as Gukurahundi.